honest with ourselves before anything else. We have to be truthful. Number one issue is we have been overspending, which means we have a debt to pay. Okay? We have to recognize that. The second step is then also be truthful to ourselves and say, you know, every time I go out and I talk to people in my plan about reducing the deficit, I always get this attitude back, well, that will never happen. Well, if we give up, it definitely will never happen. But let's take a look for a second at our current process. We have not had a budget in years.
Amen to that.
Okay, clearly our current budget process is fundamentally broken. We have to revise the entire process. Okay, now I've spent 15 years developing standards. Okay, different topic, but the same basic structure, working committees and getting things done. One of the things I've really learned through that process is you don't get things done by just attacking the people who disagree with you. You get things done by saying, okay, we have a disagreement. Let's go back to what we all agree on. And when I look at that problem in the US right now, I find that we have a huge amount that we agree on. 90% of the people I talk to agree with the concept that we should live within our means. That what we're doing right now is fundamentally immoral. Okay, so let's change the budgetary process to say, first of all, what are our spending targets as far as the deficit? Maybe we cut it 1% a year until we get it down to zero. Maybe we do it all overnight. I don't know. Let's sit down, find out what we can agree to for the deficit targets going forward, under the philosophy that virtually all Americans agree we eventually need to eliminate that debt. Now, once we've done that, we can then go back and say, okay, how much can we raise in revenue? Well, that's a simple question. We have 200 plus years of history of the US to say, how much have we ever raised in government revenue? And what we find out is the maximum we've ever been able to sustain in government revenue, I was glad to hear you cite the number, 19% of our economy under any one sustained tax program. That happened to be the Clinton tax program. There are many flaws with the Clinton tax program, but that was peak revenue. Now is also all boom years. That may have inflated that number a little bit. But at most, I would say until we prove otherwise, 19% is the most we should be assuming that we can ever possibly raise in government revenue for our economy. So, that's how much we bring in. We know our deficit targets. We know how much we can now spend every year. Now, what do we spend it on? Rather than focusing the conversation on cuts, which immediately focuses everyone on, oh, I want to protect my program, and immediately go into fights. Okay. Let's turn it around and say, what are our spending priorities? Okay. What do we really value? When we find out there's a lot of programs that 90% of Americans agree these are things we have to do. We need to pay interest on the national debt. We have a moral obligation to do that. Right now, that consumes 2% of the economy. Now, I tell you, that number is going to go up as soon as our economy recovers. Because when our economy recovers, interest rates go up, that number increases. But we have to fund that portion. Okay. The second thing is, be truthful. Everything that we say we're going to fund, that we're taxing you for a specific product, we're going to give you a particular product. So security, Medicare, transportation through gas taxes, US Postal Service, unemployment insurance, all of these different programs. Dedicated taxes designed for dedicated programs. We say we're taxing you for a particular program, let's spend that money on that particular program. If we're taxing at the wrong rate, we can come back and negotiate that later. But for starters, let's fund all of that at that level. I would say 90% of the American people would also agree we need to fund national defense, at least to the level that was the lowest since World War II, which happened to also be under Clinton, 3.5% of the economy. Finally, I would say at least 90% of the people believe that we need to keep certain programs open, like, oh, federal prisons. I don't want to release all the prisoners. Okay, we need a court system. We need to have government services to keep Social Security and everything else running, and buying their paper and all of that, keeping the lights on. Okay, you add all of that up, that's already 14% of the economy right there. Now, unfortunately, there's an awful lot that's not funded under that. Okay. In fact, as was pointed out, we're spending right now an extra 10%. Then you have new proposals to spend more money, Obamacare and other things. That adds up to about another 5%. The Republicans, and actually the Democrats, if you really look at what they're proposing right now, both want tax cuts for different groups, but they both want tax cuts, which brings us, that's about 5% from peak revenue to where we are right now. And then finally, there's people like me who say we have a moral obligation to pay back the debt. Well, if you really look at that and you meet that Jeffersonian requirement of paying back the debt within 20 years, that's another 5% of the economy. Okay? So you're talking about a total 25% of the economy in goodies that we all want, but we only have 5% that we can go out to the store and buy. Okay? One way or another, we have to sit down as a group in Congress, and like it or not, that's going to end up including Democrats and Republicans. And we have to sit down together and say, we've agreed how much we're going to spend. We've all agreed we're going to spend this much on these core programs. Now let's decide these few other programs. And you know what? If we can't agree, maybe it's just like kids at a candy store, right? Maybe you just say, okay, all of you Republicans, y'all kind of think alike. Y'all get this much money. All of you Democrats, you get this much money. You can spend it how you want. You can use it in tax cuts. You can use it in new spending programs. You can do whatever. Okay? Or maybe you break it down to each individual congressman. I don't know. But these problems aren't that hard if you approach them from a logical standpoint. The problem is we have too many congressmen up there right now that are more concerned about their jobs, more concerned about grandstanding, than fixing the real problems. And we need to get some people up there that are more interested in fixing problems.